Hi, my name is Micah Rosegrant. I use they, them pronouns, and I am an artist and community fellow at Arts Connect International. I'm so grateful to welcome you to our Art for Wellness series, guided artistic meditations for community care. This work is made possible by Arts Connect International, the Cultural Equity Learning Community, Mass Creative, the Create the Vote team, and the Theater Offensive. Additionally, we thank Arts Boston, Arts Foundation of Cape Cod, Dunamis, Elevated Thought, Mass Vote, the Front Porch Arts Collective, Massachusetts Artists Leaders Coalition, NEMA, and Stage Source for their support. In creating these community-based offerings, we were guided by these questions. What does it mean to take care of self? What does it mean to take care of community? How can art support both self and community care? How can art guide us in meaning making? We invite you to take the time to breathe deeply, stop, pause, and be with us. The artists who have curated guided artistic meditations for community care through this series are Amanda Shea, myself, and Mar Paria. Right now, you are engaging with my offering. Thank you for sharing your space and time with us. Now to the offering. Hi, my name is Micah. I use they, them pronouns, and I'm grateful to invite you to share in my personal healing practice of building altars. The use and construction of altars has existed across time and space in many communities, and I want to name that while my practice is primarily informed by the Catholic altars I grew up around, it is equally and as deeply informed and influenced by my blood and chosen families' practice with altars and the traditions that go into building and working with them. I'm excited for you to join. Before building any altar, I cultivate presence and grounding. You can do this in many ways, and I recommend everyone to explore and discover what works for them. Once I feel present and grounded, I take a moment to check in and see if I'm comfortable. Is the shape my body is cutting through the air easy? Are the fabrics touching my skin pleasurable? Do I enjoy the feeling of them on my flesh? Do I feel like I have adorned myself with what I need in order to be vulnerable enough to build and then practice with an altar? So once I am present and grounded and comfortable, then I will take the time to meditate on what altar I want to build on any given day and any given time. Today I premeditated and decided that I would show you how I build an altar to grief. So I have gathered things around me in order to do that. When you prepare and gather for any altar, I encourage you to find objects that will channel for you the energy that you want to work with on that day, or that activate the sort of memories and emotions that you want to process in that moment. So for grief, I have curated objects around ancestry and family because today I want to dedicate a grief altar to specific individuals, specific elders who I have lost in my family over my lifetime. So to start, I'm going to put in the center of my altar my phone with pictures of the elders that I'm mourning or processing grief for today. So that is my American Lola, who I lost this year, my Philippine Lolo, who I lost far earlier in my life, and my American Lolo, who I lost even earlier. So I would place this at the center of my altar. Next, this is a Barong Tagalog that I have from my homeland in Luzon, and the texture of this fabric alongside this fabric itself reminds me of my Philippine Lolo, and so I place it here. This paper crane reminds me of my American Lola. She loved birds and devoted a lot of her life to seeing and growing relationship with nature. So I place this crane in her memory. Next, some sunscreen. I invite you to really think about what senses can activate the energies and memories you want to work with. Sunscreen reminds me of the Philippines. It reminds me of being in sunshine. And so I put some on and make it a part of my altar. Also working with scents, I have some coconut oil. We used to have coconut trees in our house in the Philippines. Same with eucalyptus. Eucalyptus plants have been around my family, so I include that here. I might even sprinkle some to my wrist to activate the memory. If I hadn't put on sunscreen, I might also put on some coconut oil. And I include this gourd. My American Lolo and Lola place a lot of emphasis on tradition and reunion, and so this gourd makes me think of harvest celebrations. It makes me think of Halloween and other times when family would gather. Another sort of sense activation is this garlic. Garlic. Garlic was a big part of the cuisine I ate growing up. And as I build the altar, I'm just sort of looking at the shapes that they form and seeing what feels satisfying to my eyes, and the space that I'm cultivating. Next, I have some objects. We naturally imbue objects with meaning, so I sort of find these naturally occurring talismans to respond to and include in my altar practice. This chain was gifted to me by my mother, so I place it here. These earrings were also gifted to me by my mother, so they're sort of, in some way, the beginning of a family heirloom. Placing those here. These two bracelets were gifted to me by my friends, and so I include them in this altar to grief, to remember that I am not alone in processing loss, and that loss and grief are naturally occurring experiences for all humans. All people have to deal with mortality in their communities in different ways. This bracelet was made and gifted to me by one of my kuyas back home in Luzon. These packets of soy sauce and sriracha just remind me of the kind of dishes I had growing up, so I place them here in remembrance of that. Ooh, color pattern. This sticker is of Spirited Away, which is one of my favorite movies, and this specifically depicts the image of a bathhouse. And I just love the idea in this movie of a bathhouse being a place for spirits to gather and relieve themselves from stress. I am so interested by practices of public bathing, public cleansing, and so I'll include that in my altar here. I like to include words that are not my own in an altar, so here is a book of poems I love by Marian Chan, and I'm very lucky that this book also features on its cover Santo Niño, and Santo Niños are a major symbol of Catholicism in the Philippines, so I include that here. So once I have the objects that are conducting the sort of energy I want to welcome into the space and into the emotions or experiences or thoughts I want to work with in my altar, I will, in this case, make an offering to my ancestors, my elders, in the form of food. I think if we're going to ask them to join us in any sort of conversation or work with their memory, we need to create some sort of offering so they know that they're really welcome to be here in spirit. And so I'll be offering this peach. I like to take a bite for myself, then offer the rest to my ancestors and elders who are no longer on earth. And then at the end of my practice, when I eventually disassemble the altar, I will finish eating the food offering, whatever it is, and then return any parts of it left over to the earth. So I like food offering in the form of fruits because you can literally plant a seed for new fruits and new life to begin after this offering to your history. Next, some water, which I'll eventually pour as a libation outside, into soil, into plants. Again, I take a sip for myself and offer the rest of the glass to my people who I'm praying to. And finally, to complete the altar, I like to welcome or invite some sort of energy transfer or active sort of change in elements. That can happen in many ways. You can use an essential oil diffuser, you can use open flame like I'm able to do, you can use incense, whatever way you want to activate senses or changing energies, mass into energy, that sort of thing. I encourage you to do that and do so in whatever way is safe and makes sense for you. And this is my completed altar to grief. I now have the opportunity to practice with it as I see fit. I think practice with an altar can take many forms. It can just be simple observation. It can be meditation around the altar. You could practice yoga. You could dance. You could play music. For an altar to grief, I might play songs that my ancestors loved or listened to or taught me. I might sing a song that they introduced to me or that makes me think of them. Whatever you do, I encourage you to be fully there with your altar. And I invite you to ask questions of self-reflection. In the event of this altar and of practicing with grief, I find myself asking, how often and how long do I allow myself to sit in and move through grief? How do I let it be a part of my life? Do I treat it as a hindrance? Do I understand its necessity in the larger cycle of being a person? I invite you to ask these kinds of provocations once you have built your altar and see how the energy of the altar can enlighten you or broaden the possibilities of questioning and answering your own mind. So once you've practiced with your altar in a way that feels sufficient, in a way that feels satisfying, you can rest and relax knowing that you can return to your altar at any time. If you've positioned it somewhere that it can't exist on a more permanent basis, then feel welcome to move it. If you think that this manifestation of an altar is complete in serving and conjuring what you need it to do, then you can disassemble it. I invite you to take intention into the act of dismantling anything, and especially with something as sacred and holy as an altar you just built. Put some thought into where each of the things are going to go and how they're going to get there. One of the things I love about altars is that they can exist without physical space or 3D objects. They can exist equally in our minds, through our imaginations. We can build altars, we can imagine and envision what they would look like, what objects are there in our minds, and sort of practice with them through meditation. And we can also build altars through our words. Some of the first altars I ever built were on the page. And so here are some examples. And yeah, I invite you to explore how altars can manifest in your life in more ways than just the way I've shown you today. Before ending this offering, I want to share some thoughts about access. Whenever I think about community-based healing and spiritual practice, I think about access. And under capitalism in general, I'm often thinking about access. Who has access to what resources and why? Who has access to opportunity, wealth, privilege, and of course, care, physical, mental, and spiritual care. I want to recognize that my offering today has embedded assumptions around access to time and material ownership. To simply be engaging with me right now means that, like me, you have access to internet and technology which are not available for all people. Furthermore, my practice of building an altar relies on a certain access to space, material objects, and time, all of which are, again, not available for all people. My intention behind this offering is to open pathways for spiritual care to all people, and especially folks historically excluded from and harmed by religion, namely queer and trans people, and specifically Black, Indigenous, and other queer trans people of color. While naming this intention and believing in its importance, I want to simultaneously acknowledge the reality that capitalism always excludes vast numbers of people from emotional and spiritual wellness. Our great work lies in dismantling the structures and systems that engender and reinforce barriers to care, while we invest in community-centered alternatives with structural accountability. Thank you again for engaging. Please keep in mind that these offerings are not meant to replace essential mental health supports. Rather, these are supplemental pathways in support of self and community care. As we reckon with the history of self-care and its centering of whiteness, often at the expense and appropriation of various cultures and practices, we want to call intention and awareness to the importance of centering Black, Indigenous, people of color, queer, non-binary, and trans voices in our collective care, now and always. Maraming salamat, my thanks and peace to you.